Are we being poisoned by our own water supply? Because as many as you know, in the United States, over 70% of public tap water is fluoridated, a practice many experts defend as essential for dental health. But here's the part that they leave out, which is that most developed countries don't fluoridate their water. And somehow their teeth didn't all just fall out. So today we're going to uncover why the so-called experts in the United States are so obsessed with it.
Utah has become the first state in the United States to ban fluoride in community waters. This law was signed yesterday and will go into effect on May 7th, and this is actually very concerning.
Very concerning, says Dr. Rubin. CBS News also echoed that concern, citing a study claiming that removing fluoride from our water supply could cause 25 million cavities and cost the U.S. $9.8 billion. Alarming numbers for sure, but let me ask you this. When was the last time a U.S. health agency was worried about the cost of sickness? I'll wait. You see, it wasn't until I dug into the history of water fluoridation, and more importantly, who profits from it, that the real reason for all this outrage started to make a lot more sense to me. Let's go back to 1945 when Grand Rapids was the first city to introduce fluoride into its water supply. And then in the coming decades, fluoride was added to most public drinking water in the United States with the claim that it helps prevent tooth decay. But if we take a look at WHO data, tooth decay rates are virtually the same across multiple countries, all getting better regardless of water fluoridation. But for those countries that decided to add fluoride to their water supply, more and more studies are now coming out that are finding adverse impact on cognitive development, among other health issues. Quote, not a subtle finding, they say, and consistent with more than 50 studies. In fact, just last year, a judge in California ruled against the EPA in a lawsuit over fluoride in water, writing, quote, in all, there is substantial and scientifically credible evidence establishing fluoride poses a risk to human health. It is associated with a reduction in the IQ of children and is hazardous at dosages that are far too close to fluoride levels in the drinking water of the United States. So given the science, which a lot of people seem to care a lot about, why does Dr. Zachary Rubin, who, by the way, I have nothing against him at all, I'm sure he's a good doctor, a great doctor, but why does he claim that not fluoridating our water supply is concerning? Well, it just so happens that from time to time, he's called upon to, let's say, shill for corporate science, like guest hosting a podcast with Thermo Fisher Scientific, a $200 billion biotech and pharmaceutical company. And Thermo Fisher Scientific, maybe by coincidence, maybe not, they just happen to make millions of dollars selling testing equipment to monitor fluoride levels in municipal water systems. And to continue further down the money trail, it's also important to mention where the fluoride in our water actually comes from.
The fluoride that they get is a byproduct of the phosphate fertilizer industry, and it's called hydrofluorosilicic acid. So as a byproduct of the phosphate fertilizer industry, it's considered a hazardous waste, and it's very expensive to dispose of.
It's hazardous waste. This is what we are putting in our water. This goes all the way back to 1983 when the EPA called this, quote, an ideal solution to a long-standing problem. And since then, companies like Mosaic, formerly part of Cargill, and a few others sell this byproduct to municipalities for use in drinking water instead of paying to dispose of it as hazardous waste. Great for the bottom line, I'm sure. But the one big question I could never really figure out was how discussing the science in the context of fluoride became a third-rail issue. So I recently sat down with Dr. Stacy Whitman, a board-certified dentist, and here's what she had to say.
I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I have theories. I mean, okay, I will say, I think people that support water fluoridation, I used to be one of them. I was trained this way. I just have a hard time looking at a patient and saying, I think it's without any risk. When I know there's other ways that I can prevent oral disease in you. So I think everyone has great intentions. I think part of the issue is you either decide to just look at teeth or you decide to kind of look at the whole human. I really think that's the separation, and everyone wants the best for the population. We're just looking at it through a different lens. I also think it's really hard for big organizations like the ADA. They've been backing water fluoridation since its inception, since the 1950s, so then to go back on that, it's very complicated. I think there could be litigation issues. There's a lot of lobbyists. The fluoride lobby group is very powerful. It's really interesting. There was a podcast by the JAMA network, JAMA Pediatrics, and the editor-in-chief, he presented a paper by Rivka Green out of Canada where they followed some mother-child pairs, and it showed IQ drops on par with lead at increased fluoride levels, and increased fluoride levels that were not excessive, about 1.2 milligrams per liter. And so they said at the end of the podcast, these were pro water fluoridation. They just they admitted they had never heard there were any concerns before. They were pediatricians and they just always recommend it. They said at the end of the podcast, we feel we need to tell pregnant women and young children to avoid it now. So it's nuanced. It gets heated very quickly. I wish it didn't. I think everyone has good intentions, but I do think we need to look at the data.
Take a look at the data. Except somehow they managed to make taking a look at the data something akin to what a conspiracy theorist would do and something of a danger to society. And the billion-dollar corporations who sell hazardous waste as medicine, that is apparently science. My name is James Lee. You're watching the 5149 Show. Like and subscribe if you want more stories that go beyond what you're allowed to question in the mainstream media.
CDC agrees with NRC that it is apparent that fluorides have the ability to interfere with the functions of the brain and the body by direct and indirect means.
Yes, CDC in connection with the Intergovernmental Work Group.
So CDC does not have any data on the tolerable upper fluoride intake for neurotoxic effects on toddlers.
That's true.
Okay.